Now, Iran claims it has launched a direct missile strike on a U.S. Navy destroyer in the Indian Ocean and is now threatening to control the Strait of Hormuz.
The Pentagon released dramatic video of the strike, a rare view look from inside the subscope as it targeted the Iranian warship operating off the coast of Sri Lanka.
At 0342 local time, a Virginia-class attack submarine running 600 feet beneath the surface of the Arabian Sea fired a single Mark 48 ADCAP torpedo at a moving surface contact 4.3 nautical miles to the northeast. The torpedo left the tube at 55 knots, 380 feet of ocean above it. The target ship had no idea it was there. 22 seconds later, a 650-pound warhead detonated directly beneath the keel of the Iranian frigate Sahand. Not against the hull, beneath it. What happens underwater when a charge that size detonates is one of the more violent things physics can produce. Water is nearly incompressible. In open air, an explosion radiates outward in every direction and loses energy to the atmosphere. Underwater, there is nowhere for that energy to go except into the target. The shock wave arrives at near full force. Then comes the gas bubble. It expands at roughly the speed of a freight train, lifts the center of the hull upward by several feet in a fraction of a second, then collapses. When it collapses, it pulls the water out from beneath the ship's midsection. The bow and stern stay supported. The keel does not. A ship with a broken keel does not slow down. It folds. The Sahand was a 1,500-ton frigate that had been modernized 3 times, carried surface-to-air missiles, a 76mm naval gun, and a close-in weapon system capable of firing 4,000 rounds per minute. It took 1 torpedo and 12 minutes to reach the bottom. The Mark 48 ADCAP costs approximately $4 million. The Sahand had cost Iran roughly $80 million to build and 3 decades to maintain. The submarine that sank it was never seen, never heard, and was 40 nautical miles away by the time the rescue aircraft arrived. That is the first direction, 300 nautical miles to the northwest, inside the operations center of the USS Gravely, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer cruising at 18 knots off the coast of Oman. A fire control officer received a targeting package at 0348 local time. The package contained the last known position, course, and speed of an Iranian Mujj-class frigate designated Track 1174, operating in the northern Gulf of Oman approximately 260 miles away. The officer fed the data into the ship's Mk-41 vertical launch system and authorized the release of 2 Block V Maritime Strike Tomahawk cruise missiles. The missiles launched 6 seconds apart. Each one weighs 3,500 pounds. Carries a 1,000-pound penetrating warhead, and flies at 550 miles per hour. That is subsonic. That is slower than a commercial passenger aircraft. That sounds like a disadvantage until you understand what the Block V can do that nothing else in the world could do before 2022. It can change targets in flight. The original Tomahawk was a brilliant weapon with one critical flaw. It was a land attack missile. It could hit a building, an airfield, a bunker, anything that stayed in one place. But ships move, and the old Tomahawk had no way to track something that moved. You aimed it at a coordinate. The coordinate moved. The missile arrived at empty water. The Block V Maritime Strike variant carries a multimode seeker, active radar and imaging infrared combined. It launches. It cruises. Then, in the terminal phase, it looks. It finds the thermal signature of a ship's hull at sea. It acquires. It guides. If the target has moved 50 miles since the missile was fired, the seeker finds it anyway. And the two-way data link means the operator sitting in the Gravely's Combat Information Center can update the target while the missile is still airborne. Fire first. Decide later. What Track 1174 did not know was that it had been continuously tracked by an MQ-4C Triton maritime surveillance drone flying at 57,000 feet for the past 9 hours. The frigate's captain believed his ship was operating in a radar shadow cast by the Omani coastline. He was. But the Triton does not use radar from below. It uses a synthetic aperture sensor from above. The first Tomahawk arrived at 0512 local time. The second arrived 14 seconds later. Track 1174 was still maneuvering when the first missile hit. An Arleigh Burke-class destroyer carries 96 vertical launch cells. That is the entire magazine for everything: air defense missiles, ballistic missile interceptors, Tomahawks, anti-submarine rockets. The captain decides the loadout before the ship leaves port. Every maritime strike Tomahawk loaded into a cell is an SM-2 air defense missile that isn't there. Every SM-6 interceptor is a ship killer that isn't loaded. 96 rounds. Attack and defense from the same finite rack. The math does not change at sea. That is the second direction. 480 miles to the east, aboard the USS Carl Vinson operating in the Central Arabian Sea, the air wing was at flight quarters by 0300. The mission assigned to Strike Package Bravo was the suppression of Iran's largest remaining surface combatant, the destroyer Iris Dina, a 3,200-ton Mujj-class vessel carrying medium-range surface-to-air missiles, 4 anti-ship cruise missiles, and an active electronically scanned array radar capable of tracking 120 targets simultaneously. On paper, the Dina was the most capable surface warship in the Iranian Navy. On paper, its layered air defense should have been able to engage 6 incoming threats simultaneously. Strike Package Bravo launched 2 F-divided by a -18E Super Hornets carrying 4 LRASM missiles each.
8 missiles total, 2 aircraft, total weight of ordnance, 22,000 pounds.
The LRASM, the long-range anti-ship missile, costs approximately $3 million per unit and weighs 2,756 pounds. Its warhead is 1,000 pounds of penetrating high explosive. During its cruise phase it flies at moderate altitude using GPS and inertial navigation, invisible to casual observation but detectable to a good radar system. In the final 12 miles, it descends to between 5 and 10 feet above the water surface. At 10 feet above the ocean, the geometry of radar detection changes entirely. Every radar system on Earth is limited by the curvature of the planet. The horizon is not a metaphor. It is a physical boundary. A ship's surface search radar, mounted 60 feet above the waterline, has a detection range against a low-flying missile of roughly 10 to 15 nautical miles. Against something flying at 10 feet above the waves, that shrinks to under 12 miles. An LRASM traveling at high subsonic speed covers 12 nautical miles in approximately 80 seconds. 80 seconds from detection to impact. The Dina's air defense officer had 80 seconds. But the feature that separates the LRASM from every other ship-killing weapon in the American inventory is not its stealth profile. It is what happens when the network dies. If the data link is jammed, if the electronic warfare suite aboard an Iranian ship successfully severs the communication between the missile and the aircraft that launched it, most smart weapons go dumb.
They fly straight, they miss.
This is the logic behind every naval electronic warfare system on Earth. Cut the link and the weapon loses its brain. The LRASM does not lose its brain. It carries a passive electronic support measure sensor that listens for the electromagnetic emissions of enemy radars. It carries an imaging infrared seeker that reads thermal signatures on the ocean surface. When the data link goes silent, the missile switches to onboard artificial intelligence, identifies targets from their radar emissions and heat signatures, ranks them by threat priority, selects the highest value match, and prosecutes the attack autonomously, without a single instruction from the aircraft that launched it. The Dina's electronic warfare suite did, in fact, successfully jam the LRASM data links at 11 nautical miles. All 8 missiles switched to autonomous mode and kept flying. An air defense system that can simultaneously engage 6 threats with fire control illuminators would, theoretically, handle 6 of the 8 missiles. The Dina engaged 4. Successfully.
The crew was good.
The system was working exactly as designed.
4 missiles remained.
Each LRASM is designed to aim for a specific point on the target ship's hull, based on its onboard threat library. The first 2 hit the forward missile magazine and the combat information center. The third hit the engine room. The Dina lost propulsion and all radar emissions within 90 seconds of the first impact. The fourth missile, its AI still searching for an active radar emitter from its target, found the Dina's emergency power generator still broadcasting and guided to that. Iran's most capable surface combatant fired back with everything it had. It intercepted 4 missiles. It was on fire and dead in the water inside 2 minutes. It would not be the last example of what happens when a $3 million missile with an AI seeker meets a ship whose air defense magazine runs out before the threats do. That is the third direction. 600 miles to the northeast, on a rocky uninhabited island chain approximately 43 nautical miles southwest of the Strait of Hormuz, a Marine staff sergeant and a 4-man team from the 3rd Marine Littoral Regiment finished setting up the second launcher at 0215 local time. They had arrived by C-130 at 0047. The aircraft had been on the ground for 11 minutes. It departed without shutting down its engines. The system they deployed is called MESIS, the Navy Marine Expeditionary Ship Interdiction System. It is built on a JLTV chassis, a Joint Light Tactical Vehicle modified for unmanned operation. It carries 2 naval strike missiles in sealed canisters. The entire launcher can be loaded onto a C-130 Hercules cargo aircraft by a team of 5 Marines in under 20 minutes. It can be set up and ready to fire in under an hour. It costs approximately $2.1 million per launcher. The naval strike missile it carries was designed by Kongsberg Defence and Aerospace of Norway. It weighs 882 pounds, flies at Mach 0.93, roughly 710 miles per hour, and carries a 265-pound penetrating warhead. Its composite airframe gives it one of the lowest radar cross-sections of any cruise missile currently in service. Its terrain-following guidance lets it fly at wave-top height using GPS and inertial reference. In the terminal phase, An imaging infrared seeker identifies the target ship and steers to the highest heat section of the hull. What makes Nemesis strategically different from every other weapon in this video is not the missile. It is the geography. A strait is not simply a body of water.
It is a choke point.
Ships must pass through it. There is no other route. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 nautical miles wide at its narrowest point. 20% of the world's traded oil passes through it. Any naval force that needs to project power into or out of the Persian Gulf must transit it. Place Nemesis launchers on the islands flanking a strait and the waterway becomes a missile trap. The enemy fleet's air defense systems must now account for threats coming not just from ships and aircraft, but from any rock large enough to land a C-130. Every uninhabited island becomes a potential fire position. Targeting those positions requires surveillance, strike aircraft, and time. And while the fleet is searching for launch sites, it is maneuvering inside a 21-mile channel where its own movement options are severely limited. You do not need to sink the ship to win. You only need to make every island dangerous enough that the fleet chooses not to transit. During exercise Balikatan in April 2026, Marines from the 3rd Marine Littoral Regiment flew Nemesis launchers by C-130 to islands in the northernmost Philippines overlooking the Luzon Strait, the most strategically significant waterway in the Western Pacific. They set up, aimed at the strait, and rehearsed the interdiction of naval traffic from the shore. The Chinese Navy watched the exercise from 3 surveillance vessels positioned at the edge of international waters. The staff sergeant on the Hormuz Island chain received targeting data from an MQ-9BC Guardian drone at 0324. An Iranian corvette, 600 tons, was transiting at 14 knots, bearing 238 degrees, 12 nautical miles out. He fired both missiles at 0327. Reload by hand takes approximately 45 minutes. The tubes were empty by 0328. The corvette's captain had no radar warning. The Naval Strike Missile has no active radar seeker during cruise. It emits nothing detectable until the infrared seeker activates in the terminal phase, at which point the crew had 31 seconds. 2 missiles hit simultaneously. The corvette was operating at 30% capacity 4 minutes later. It did not sink immediately, but it never moved under its own power again. That is the 4th direction. Now consider what the defending commander faced. His ship's air defense system, an Aegis equivalent with a phased array radar and a vertical launch magazine, was built to intercept threats arriving from above and from the horizon. Against a missile coming in at Mach 3.5 from 50 miles away, it can engage. Against a sea-skimming cruise missile at 10 feet of altitude, it has roughly 60 seconds. Against a torpedo running 40 meters beneath the hull, its radar tells it nothing at all. And against a launcher sitting behind a ridgeline on an island 12 miles away, it does not receive a warning until the missile is already 20 seconds from impact.
4 physics problems. 4 different altitudes. 4 different detection timelines.
All arriving in the same engagement window. The Aegis combat system can simultaneously guide interceptors against roughly 8 to 12 targets, depending on the variant. That figure is not limited by software. It is limited by the number of fire control illuminators physically attached to the hull. Those illuminators are what paint a target and guide a missile to impact. The ship cannot engage more targets than it has illuminators pointing at them at the same moment. 4 LRASM from 1 Super Hornet is a manageable problem. 8 from 2 aircraft, arriving simultaneously from different bearings, while 2 maritime strike Tomahawks come in from the surface at the same time, while a torpedo is running beneath the hull and a Nemesis launcher is firing from a coastline the air defense radar cannot see around, is not a magazine problem. It is a mathematics problem. Every layer of defense covers one direction. 4 directions arriving simultaneously is saturation. And the American way of war in the maritime domain in 2026 is not built around one decisive weapon. It is built around the simultaneous arrival of 4 weapons that require 4 completely different defensive responses, from 4 directions that no single system on Earth can cover at once. A ship is not sunk by a better missile. It is sunk by a torpedo, a cruise missile, an autonomous AI seeker, and a marine with a launcher on a rock, all arriving in the same 4 minutes.
Not one fist. 4 physics problems.
The question the American Navy has been quietly answering for the past decade was never which direction is most dangerous. The answer was always, all of them,
at the same time.
If you enjoyed this video, check out our other video on how the US Navy hunts submarines.
Bye for now.